afternoon, Algebra 1 students. I thought a change of scenery was about due. So we have the question 2, which statements describe the graph of the equation x equals -2? Select all that apply. First A says the graph of the line is a horizontal line. So let's draw a little graph here. This is our x-axis, this is our y-axis. Notice that x goes from left to right, and y goes from down to up. So, which one's horizontal, which one's vertical? Well, think of it this way. If this is -1, this is -2, this is -1, and this is -2. Over here, we're at -2 on the x-axis. So let's draw that with a blue line, a little dashed blue line. And then let's draw this one with a dashed red line. Well, if we're at x equals -2, then that would mean that any point along this blue line, like over here at the intersection, or over here, would be where x equals -2. Anything outside of it, like if we're on the red line where x equals -3, well, if x equals -3, we're outside the line. Same thing if we're at x equals -1, we're outside the line, so we know we have to be on the blue line for x equals -2, and that's a vertical line. This red one is horizontal. That's from left to right, but vertical from up to bottom. A says the graph of the line is a horizontal line, so it's not a horizontal line. So let's cross out A. Now B says the slope of the line is undefined. So undefined would be any point wherein the denominator is 0. If I have some number divided by 0, that's going to be undefined. Whereas if I have 0 divided by some number, that's simply going to equal 0. So we have, let's say for these 2 points that I made the little black dots, we'll call that x equals -2, obviously, and y equals 0, and then again x equals -2, but y equals -3. Or actually, no, y would, whatever there, y, yeah, -2. Sorry. So then, slope is rise over run, which is y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. So over there we'd be taking, if I take this as my y2 and x2, I'm going to take the y values. So 0 minus -2. And then I'm going to take for the x values -2 minus -2. Well, 0 minus 2 is just -2, but -2 minus -2, think of that like that negative being multiplied by that -2, which would be positive, but anything minus a negative number is just adding it, so that's the same thing as -2 plus 2, which equals 0, and -2 divided by 0, well, that's the same thing as 0 goes into -2 how many times? Well, the world may never know. It's like how many licks you get it takes to get to the center of a Tootsie Roll Pop. If you kids ever saw the famous commercial with the owl. And if not, just know that the world may never know. It's undefined. So, yes, that one would be true. So, be true. Whereas if it was the other way around, if we were to take some point, like say these 2 points over here, we know that's -2 and -2, and this point would be this point here, be x equals 0, and y, of course, equals -2. So again, I'll take that 0. No, excuse me. I'm going to take this -2 this time. This -2 here, -2 minus that -2 divided by -2 minus 0. Let's see, well, -2 minus -2, we know that's the same thing as -2 plus 2, which equals 0. And -2 minus 0 is just -2. And that would be the same thing as -2 goes into 0 how many times? Well, -2 goes into 0 times. So horizontal line has a 0 slope. This red line at y equals -2 has a slope equal to 0, whereas our vertical line x equals -2 has an undefined slope. Undefined slope. So the point being, if you have a vertical line, it's always going to be a undefined slope, and if you have a horizontal line, like y equals something, that's always going to be a 0 slope. And again, if it's x equals something, that's a vertical line, and if it's y equals something, that's a horizontal line. And one way to remember that, if all else, apart from visualizing it, is that if you're thinking about x equals something and x is on the x-axis and the x-axis is from left to right, then you're sort of doing the opposite of that, because it's any value on that would be equal to x, so it's going to be a vertical line in order for that to work. Anyway, moving on to C, the graph passes through the ordered pair -2 and 3. So -2 and 3, let's say this was 1, this is 2, this is 3 maybe. Well, yeah, we could have a point where x equals -2 and y equals 3. As long as x equals -2, we can have anything for y, so that works. And then the x-intercept of the line is -2, 0. Well, remember that an x-intercept is where we have our x, that's our input and that's our output, but x and y. And we say that when x is equal to 0, when x is equal to 0, what does y equal? That is the, oh, excuse me. Why am I doing that backwards? X-intercept is where y equals 0. What does x equal? That makes sense. What does x equal? Well, no matter what, x is going to equal -2. So, and also visually, that's just the point where the graph crosses through the x-axis. So the y-axis, on the other hand, would be what I was originally saying. When x equals 0, what does y equal? So on this, when x equals 0, well, x never equals 0. X is always negative 2. So we don't, even if it asked us what the y-axis intercept was, well, that would be illogical because there is no y-axis. There's no point. There is no y-intercept. There is no y-intercept. There is a y-axis, but this graph never crosses the y-axis, so therefore there is no y-intercept. It does definitely cross the x-axis, and so when x always equals negative 2, but when y equals 0, yes, x equals negative 2 right over here, this point here. That is the x-intercept. So D is correct, C is correct, B is correct, and A is not. Thank you. And it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood.